The tariff war is heating up between President Trump and Congress. Now, of course, Trump has imposed sweeping tariffs on countries all around the world using his own unilateral authority. Now, some members of Congress have signed onto a bill that would curb Trump's tariff-imposing power. It's called the Trade Review Act. The bill would force the president to give Congress a 48-hour notice before he imposes the tariffs. Then Congress would have to approve them within 60 days.
Congress would also be able to end the tariffs if they wish. The 7 Republicans who have signed onto the bill include Senators Chuck Grassley, Mitch McConnell, Jerry Moran, Lisa Murkowski, Thom Tillis, Todd Young, and Susan Collins. The Democratic co-sponsors are Senators Amy Klobuchar, Mark Warner, Michael Bennet, Peter Welch, Chris Coons, and Richard Blumenthal.
Chuck Grassley also said in a statement earlier this month, quote, "For too long, Congress has delegated its clear authority to regulate interstate and foreign commerce to the executive branch. Building on my previous efforts as a Finance Committee chairman, I'm joining Senator Cantwell to introduce the Bipartisan Trade Review Act of 2025 to reassert Congress's constitutional role and ensure that Congress has a voice in trade policy." Trump has threatened to veto that bill. Now, the White House sent a statement to congressional offices today that reads, "If passed, this bill would dangerously hamper the president's authority and duty to determine our foreign policy and protect our national security. If this bill were presented to the president, he would veto it." Senate Majority Leader John Thune also weighed in, stating, "I don't think that has a future. The president's indicated he would veto it. I don't see how they would get it on the floor in the House. So at this point, we're kind of just waiting to see what's going to happen next."
Senator Rand Paul said that while it's hard to overturn a veto, the debate is still worth having.
And Trump threatened to impose a 104% tariff on China yesterday. China said it would fight to the end and called Trump's move blackmail. Meanwhile, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that he was leading negotiation efforts with the government of Japan. The EU has also offered a 0-to-0 tariff deal with the U.S. The EU also said, however, they were ready to retaliate if the two don't reach a deal. Trump touted earlier this morning on Truth Social, "I just had a great call with the acting president of South Korea. We have the confines and probability of a great deal for both countries. Their top team is on a plane heading to the U.S. Things are looking good. We are likewise dealing with many other countries, all of whom want to make a deal with the United States. It seems like the markets are reacting since the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ all jumped at least 2.8% as of 9:50 this morning. So markets reacting very favorably to news that deals might get in place. I certainly hope that happens to reduce the tariffs everywhere. And then, maybe Trump can count this as a success. If there was very temporary pain that resulted in having no tariffs with a variety of nations, that would be good. Now, I would still say, well, why did you even put them on certain nations that we don't have tariffs on us anyway? That's certainly not how I would have done it. Maintaining the pressure on China might be good for some other national security reason. But the bottom line of it is that I do agree with Rand Paul and other Republican members of Congress that the president unilaterally having this authority to regulate the economy, the global economy to this degree, is not something, you and I talk about the founders' intentions a lot, is certainly not something that the people who assembled our Constitution thought that power should be unilaterally and solely invested in the executive branch. Absolutely not. Please, Congress, do your jobs, do your freaking jobs already, and exercise some control over this process.
Well, I agree with you more than not on the things that you just said. The founders had more than an intention. It's written out in the Constitution. These are things that are under the purview of Congress. And of course, what Trump is doing that is so disturbing to me and others is that he's using national security as an excuse to transgress and to overreach with executive authority. And it's very heartening to see, in some ways, I think that's what happened with the Supreme Court. Supreme Court in some ways going with him, in some ways not. The judiciary needs to stand up to him now, and Congress needs to stand up to him now in any ways that they feel he's getting into their constitutionally established territory. And he will veto the bill. On the other hand, I agree with Rand Paul. It's still worth it to have the conversation. The American people need to see that Congress is not just caving to whatever he wants. Now, the one thing I don't agree with you on is this issue of China. I mean, China is not amused. And China, some are calling the White House.
We're not amused by China either.
Well, but that's sort of not my point at this moment. Yes, obviously, leaders don't want their own economies to tank, so they want to make a deal and so forth. And in some cases, it might be good for the United States. We'll see. I don't want to be closed to that possibility. Obviously, you would agree with me that such things as tariffs on islands that are uninhabited by human beings, but are only inhabited by penguins, was not such a good idea. But there are many that were inhabited by human beings where it's also insane, and where his chart about reciprocal tariffs was absolutely ridiculous, absurd, and filled with lies. Now, this business about China. When I said China's not amused, China has said now, and you know, when they speak, the really scary part about Xi, he means it when he says it. He says, we are prepared for war of any kind. We are prepared for economic war. We are prepared for tariffs war. So that's what I think we need to keep our eyes on. That's the one, you know, Bessent was saying, oh, they're all calling, they all want to make a deal. China's not calling. China doesn't want to make a deal necessarily. So that's where I think all of us need to keep our eye on that ball and see what happens, because that's perilous stuff.
It is perilous. I might respond that China is already engaged, has already been engaged in a form of economic warfare against us by ripping off the products of our companies, by doing their own tariff and protectionist policies, by bullying American companies that want to act there, saying they have to censor or take down. Our own, it's horrifying to me when American companies resort to censorship in order to appease the Chinese government, to get into the Chinese markets. How that has affected basketball has been very bad. How it's affected online gaming has been very bad. How it affected Google was bad, obviously, with them taking down, finding information about Tiananmen Square and other things. And so it's very bad.
Yes, and also when they will give away secrets. You know, it used to be, well, as long as they don't give away military secrets. These days, anything technological is, you know, potentially a threat to our national security. So you're right. I'm not trying to paint the Chinese as all innocents here. All I'm saying is that they will not just bow down to Donald Trump and just take it.
And like you,
it's scary.
And like you, I don't want to deal with this by having a greater military escalation with China. We should view it in, you know, in this, like the Soviet Union, we did not ever fight an actual war with them with armies, right? Which is good. They eventually collapsed because our economy was more powerful and better and freer, I would argue, than theirs, which made us more productive, more prosperous, and they collapsed from their own absurdities. That is what I hope to happen with China, by having a better, more powerful economy, by trading and relying on trusted allies, people who want to engage in these reciprocal arrangements that benefit them and us. Make sure if there's important medical or pharmaceutical or military technology that there are other places we can get it other than China itself. That doesn't mean it has to all be made in the U.S., and I so disagree with the protectionist type people who are arguing that we got to make everything ourselves in the U.S. That's just, it's so silly. It's like honestly can't even be engaged.
Realistic in today's world for the reasons that Milton Friedman said. I have to give you that one.
So, that doesn't mean we have to rely on China for it. Let's find other places that want to do these things and benefit, and so that should be the trade policy moving forward, in my view.
Yes. However, when you talk about a Cold War, which is basically what you just described, the problem with the Cold War is that if things don't go well, it can turn into a hot war.
Yes.
When you were talking about the Cold War between Russia and the United States, this is, when you talk about the Bay of Pigs, when you talk about Khrushchev, when you talk about Kennedy, there were very sane men. These were men who were very clear in the final analysis that we didn't want a nuclear war here. This is
who ordered the Bay of Pigs invasion in the first place? That was not a good idea.
A big mistake.
Catastrophic.
Absolutely. But I'm talking about the missile, when the missiles in Cuba.
Right. I'm glad Kennedy prevailed over it sounded like generals who actually wanted to have World War III over that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's what the Cuban Missile Crisis really was about. That is my point, though. Ultimately, we had presidents who understood the importance of withdrawal, who understood the importance of holding back when nuclear war was anywhere in the field.
Presidents who are willing to tell their generals no.
Well,
that's how I would put it.
Wait a minute, you're twisting things. Hold on, stay with me here. This goes back to what we were talking about with Trita, what we were talking about before with Ken Klippenstein's article, Pete Hegseth already telling people at the Pentagon, prepare for war with China. I'm very concerned. I do think that Trump we'll see, but he's making indications that he's way more trigger happy than I think a lot of his own supporters would wish for him to be. The way he talks about Iran, the way he talks about China, and obviously things going on with Gaza and so forth. So the president is not turning out to be Mr. Peacenik that many of us hoped he would be. Not that I ever thought he would be. But.
Well, up next, we're going to hear more of Marianne's thoughts on all this. It's time for her memo. Are we living through a golden age or an age of totalitarianism? More Rising right after this.